Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Keeping It Real with Tiff and Carl. I'm Carl Rabun,
And I'm Tiffany Salcido.
and we are saucy, 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 saucy. It it is a
Yes, we are.
live, it's a live morning, start of a new week. Weather's changing a little bit. We're trying to figure out our lives as we go forward, right? And so we're just having a really good conversation. But even before the podcast, that we're thinking about carrying over into what we're talking about, and just how us as consultants who do training, instruction, leadership, consulting, coaching, just the life and how it's awesome, but it's also got its things that always can be repaired, right? So
Right.
I don't know
For
how you
sure.
feeling, Tiff. How you feeling, Tiff?
I am feeling so I don't know if you watch, I don't know what it's called, but there's a wing challenge where like celebrities come on this little thing and they eat like different like levels
Hot
of
ones, hot
wings.
ones, yeah,
Hot ones. Okay, perfect.
yeah,
So I was feeling very saucy like a few days ago. I was pissed. I was pissed. And I had to like remember who I am, because I wanted to go back to the old me, and the old me was not as refined. The old me was not as kind. And so I was really like trying to stay like in my reputation as a good person, but I was on level 10 of the hot ones, let me tell you. And I was like really focusing. I'm like a level 4.5 after I've had a few days to kind of like process and stuff like that. But um it was kind of interesting because last week I did some training. I was like back on the road again last week because I saw you, Carl. We saw each other. We didn't have time to do a podcast, but we did get to see each other um, and ruffle some feathers with that picture we took. Let me tell you, there were a few people that I heard from that said, "What? Why? Where were you? And how come I wasn't there?" And
uh,
but with that being said, I was on the road all week doing different classes, and what came up in every single class, everyone, and there were three different topics: drama, drama at work, and then I had drama. I had a little bit of drama, so I was like, "What are the skills? What do I teach? How do we practice this?" Right? So I have
yeah,
to like really put my money where my mouth is, and walk the walk and not just talk the talk. But it was definitely from a human being perspective really difficult for me to not get into the drama because I really wanted to.
yeah,
Really wanted to. So
yeah.
that's why
In those
I'm saucy.
situations,
Yeah.
yeah, in those situations, I the best way for me to handle those types of situations is to I find myself wanting to know more information,
Hmm.
right? We've talked about, this is how I'm feeling. What more do I need to know? I find myself doing that more often, which I think is a blessing for me, being, uh, damn, I'll be 53 in 2 weeks, y'all.
Ooh.
Uh, 53, that's crazy. 50, 15 and a 53-year-old body. But, just thinking about how I manage that, right? And receiving that information. I mean, you know, whenever we talk about stuff that's annoying or that's happening or you need to vent, what do I do? I end up going into questions, right? Well, what
Mhm.
happened? How did this happen? You know, what did you save this? Did you write back? Those type of things. And I find that when I have situations happen. I just had something happen, 45 minutes ago. But you should never go grocery shopping when you're hungry. You probably shouldn't
Right.
pod when you're upset. But it,
Right. Right. Probably a good idea.
just keeping it real, y'all. Right.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it leads me to more questions, right? I can be emotional, but where's my emotion gonna get me, right? I could be mad. Shoot, I woke up this morning and I was missing an earbud, and I found it in our puppy's crate, and it was chewed up beyond recognition.
Mm,
You know,
mm, mm.
so that's frustrating. That's annoying. Yeah, but okay, so what happened? How can I, how do I keep that from happening again? Right. And rather than going to what's wrong with her? Why does she always do that? That doesn't have to it may not be about her, even if it is
Right.
about her, how do I limit that to keep that from happening when a dog gonna bite. So how do you stay away from that
Right.
dog? Right? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Or how do you address the fact that, and if the dog isn't in your control, how do you help, let people know, hey, look, neighbor, keep your dog in your yard or whatever else it is on a
Right.
leash,
Right.
right? So addressing those things, and so I go into problem solving mode more now than I do. That's my reaction is problem solving mode.
Hmm. Hmm.
And rather than, you know, hollering, screaming, writing back, or doing something incendiary, because, if I send a fireball somewhere, I'm gonna end up getting burnt by that fireball. And
Yeah, true that.
you know, life is life is too complicated. I wasn't gonna say life is too short. Life is too complicated,
Yeah.
right? There's too many layers of stuff, too many, rungs on the ladder we got to climb to, let that 30 seconds out of, let me tell you exactly how I feel. Oh, that felt good. Okay, now I'm not worried about that person. I'm also worried about maybe what's the fallout from other people. Gosh, I mean, he was right, but did he have to, you know, it's like Jay-Z said in Song Cry, you ain't got to get me back like that,
Right.
right? I mean, so is that who you want to be? Is that how you want to win? And we've been seeing that all this whole last week. My whole thought is, gosh, I don't want to win that way, right? How do
Right.
I, how do I, stay in that path where I can be myself even in the face of adversity and still be able to keep my identity of who I am and who I want to be and who I want the world to be and to model
Right.
that way. So
Right.
it's, I'm really, I'm glad that I'm at that point now where I ask questions and react. I've never been much of a reactor, but every time I've reacted emotionally, it's always come back to bite me. And so, it's I'm
Well,
just I'm happy that where I'm where I'm at with my emotions in that way. So unless you're messing with my money is like messing with my emotions,
right.
right? Big Worm said that. So
Right. Well, so on my side, you and I, we have a lot of similarities, but in some ways we're very, very different. I think that I am a bit more assertive, Carl, than you might be. Not that you're a pushover, but you are definitely softer in your approach than I usually am, because, like this is what's going on. Let's fix it. But I also will admit that I in my older age. I have learned to like choose my battles wisely. And there's a lot of things that maybe I don't love that in the past I probably would have like, you know, gone into very aggressive mode. Um, and I've learned that not everything deserves that. I've even tried to like go in the opposite direction, like, just figure it out, right? If you can't stop the waves, learn how to surf. Just navigate through it. Um, but what I'm starting to find is that there has to be like this fine balance between like I'm letting it go and I'm being the bigger person, and am I enabling like bad behavior? And that's kind of where I think I'm on the fence right now. Like I have gone so far to the opposite of like it's not a big deal. It's kind of rude. It's inconvenient, not a good business practice, but I can work through it. I'll navigate and I'll find a solution because I too am very solution focused. Um, and how do I still address this behavior because it is bothersome, it is negative, it has big world consequences. I can't just enable like bad behavior, but how do I do it in a way that's not aggressive? Because we're like in the disc as an eye, like one of the things that we're famous for is that we tend to be a little bit dramatic. I'll vouch for that. We're a bit dramatic and again, we are like head on. And that can be really, really hard for people, especially that don't share that quality that, like, let's just be direct and address it. It can be really overwhelming. And sometimes they feel bullied or they feel like they're put in a corner. So I'm really kind of navigating as an adult, a big old grown adult. I'm not as old as you, Carl, but I'm creeping. I'm catching up pretty quick. Sorry, you said you're 53. I'm not there yet, but I'm getting there. But with
I
that
just
being,
sprouted I just sprouted a new gray hair right here. So
me too, me too. Yeah, but where I'm saying is like I I have to sometimes fight that like natural instinct to go, like, you want to come for me? Like, I'm going to make your ancestors feel my wrath because that's
Yeah.
that's my style, but that's
Yeah.
not helpful. And I recognize that that's not helpful and it's not healthy and it doesn't move us towards anything good. And that's why I stay away from that. In my first instinct, I might find someone who I love that I could go, oh my God, and get all the drama out and then be like, okay, so what's the next thing that's going to be helpful here? Because
Yeah.
that, what just happens, not helpful. It's real and it's like valid for me and I feel
Yeah.
that way, but it's also, I know, a bit dramatized and maybe not gonna lead us into anything good. So I'll keep that in the car
Yeah.
or wherever I'm at, keep that
Yeah.
in the car, and then I'm going to do something that's going to hopefully lead towards a good outcome. But that's some days it's easier than others, let me tell you. And when I was
Well,
at
I
level 10,
yeah.
it was really hard to not go there.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a fundamental difference. You're talking about disc. I think that's the fundamental difference between S and I, right? I'm an S, you're an I.
Mhm.
I's are more action oriented. Hey, this I'm going to respond. Let's respond quicker, right? S's tend to be more naturally reflective on it. Okay, this has happened. Let me get a lay of the land. And then, is it worth responding to? When sometimes, yeah, it's absolutely worth responding
Yeah.
to. I,
Yeah.
and I mean, I had a situation where I felt like I had to respond.
Mhm.
There's so much I will take, and to the point where, don't mistake my kindness for weakness.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
when there is something that needs to be addressed, how do I address it in a thoughtful way that doesn't intentionally burn bridges, right?
Right.
So,
Right.
if someone has wronged me, if someone wrongs you, you're not the victim, right?
No.
You don't have to be the victim. You can be the person who is addressing the situation. There's a difference between being assertive and being victimized. And woe is me is not going to pay my mortgage, right?
Right.
And so, what are we doing? What information do I need to know? Who do I need to speak to have the right information, be able to make decisions on where I go after that? And I think I think that's not only that's my personality, but also just a maturity that I've had, over the years to not make that first response the the response that I go with. Just, my grandma always she told me when I was a kid, never burn a bridge, right?
Oh, and
And
see,
yeah,
and
yeah,
this
and
is
you
the
you bring you,
okay, yeah.
you bring demolition equipment. I get it, so
Yes, but let me say the my thing is sometimes the best light comes from a burning bridge. That's my little counter to that.
yeah,
But I will
yeah,
say, like, I want to clear something up really quick between I's and S's. There's a lot of things we have in common, but a real common or maybe not so common misconception about like I's is that we're people pleasers. And I want to just say we are not people pleasers. People
no,
are just usually pleased with us because we're high
right,
performers and we really are passionate and we care and we're enthusiastic about whatever it is that we're doing. And so people are pleased because we're reliable. Wait, we're dependable. We're actually not dependable. That's the
yeah,
opposite. We're very flighty, but we usually come correct on the stuff that we do because we really care, but we're definitely not people pleasers. And I think that's the difference between S's and I's. Like
yeah,
where I think with you and I and where we're at in sense of like how we address things, you might be more thoughtful because you don't want to burn that bridge. Relationships are important and you don't want to hurt people's feelings. And I agree with that too. I definitely don't want to hurt people's feelings. I think where I'm a bit different, and maybe this isn't my style, maybe it's just who I am, is that um, I really care about like justice, right? I really care
hmm
about justice. And coming from a person with a lot of privilege, and part of that privilege is I have, a lot of great professional relationships with people and I have opportunities. And if one thing doesn't work out, I have the ability to be like, no, that doesn't feel good to me. So I'm not going to do that anymore. And I'm going to focus more here. Um, I have a bit of flexibility where I don't have to say yes to stuff, right? I can say no to some things. And that's, again, from a place of privilege. And so I have to like really use that voice to advocate for not just myself, but for other people who also might be suffering some of the same slights that I'm experiencing that maybe don't have the ability to bring it up without
right,
fear of repercussion.
right,
Um, and so that's where I'm kind of at in that justice part of it. Like do I look the other way because, maybe it was an oversight, or, maybe whatever, if I give the benefit of the doubt, but at the same time, an injustice happened, and it's probably happened before, and it probably will continue to happen. And so where do I stand up and say, like,
Mhm.
let's fix this,
Yeah,
right? Like we
yeah,
fix this one issue, but there's a whole lot of underlying things that have to be addressed, that just fixing this one thing is not going to fix the root cause. I don't want to
yeah,
put a band-aid on a bullet hole. Like, we need to do
yeah.
surgery.
Yeah.
And that's where
And
I'm at.
no, I get it. And I just, just to play off of what you were just saying, the idea of people pleasing, I've seen eyes that are people pleasers because they enjoy the adulation that they get, the positive response that they get. And so they want to keep having that positive response. So they seek out people, that respond to them well. And then they want to keep them responding well. So that's not healthy. Just
Right,
as much as
right,
it's not healthy for an
right,
S to be a out and out people pleaser, because then you will be an accommodator and have people
right,
run all over you. That's the thing. So recognizing, you know, what it is to be assertive. I's are assertive. S's can be assertive. I'm assertive
yeah,
as I
sure,
need to be, right? There's
yeah,
certain hills I'm not going to die on
right, right,
because when that really is like what I was talking about. I can hold my powder and really think about what is it that, how
mm-hmm.
it's affecting me. Is this something that is affecting others? Like you said, the idea of fairness and justice. I mean, I'll speak to anybody about, a lot of the stuff that people are calling woke. I mean, it's not about being woke. It's about speaking the truth, and and I can have that conversation with anybody, and I,
Yeah,
I'll be glad to do it. But there's certain things that just aren't worth my time, especially if they're not going to get fixed, right? But at the same time, how do I approach it in a thoughtful way? That's the thing. I's and S's are on that relationship side.
right,
So we're thinking about other people. I's more in a global way. How do I get people to move in a positive way? S's are more of the intimate,
right, right,
team one-on-one type of thing, but they're still about human connection. But with human connection, there has to be boundaries,
right,
right?
yeah,
And not just boundaries or other people infringe upon you, where you infringe upon your own boundaries. You have to
mm-hmm.
be able to set your boundaries, recognize what is acceptable for me and who I am, my self image, and recognizing what is important to me and what doesn't have to be important to me. But, and if what's important to you is how it's affecting other people, cool, that's right in your boundaries, right? But I've seen it way too many times where people who are S's. I was just in a conversation last week with managers, and somebody said they didn't get a job, and the person that was on their hiring panel said, "Yeah, well, you're too nice. You're too nice, right?" And so, and so that person said, I needed to work on my boundaries because being too nice, just they were worried that I wasn't going to um, have difficult conversations. I was going to give in. And they said, yeah, that's where I tend to lean because I want to help people. And cool, it's great to help people. Some of the best ways
Right,
to help people is to help them recognize where they can grow and how you can help them grow. And the only way you're going to help them grow is if you stick to your boundaries. That's sometimes the most compassionate. Brene Brown said that the most compassionate thing
mm-hmm.
that you can do is to address, to uphold your boundaries because you're letting people know this is where you're starting to affect me, and so you
Yeah,
have to be consistent. And as long as true, and we're going to talk about trust again, but trust is based off of consistency and integrity, doing what you say you're going to
yeah,
do when nobody's looking and being that same person every time. And so the people
and don't be a
pleasing
liar.
part, and don't
Yeah,
be a liar.
and don't be a liar.
And I can tell you, I love making people smile. I love making people feel touched or motivated or engaged. That is one of the best things about, the jobs that we do. But I'm not going to do it at any cost. I'm not going to do it where it will affect my idea of my self image. I'm too old for that shit, right? Jung says, you truly know yourself around mid 40s, early 50s. I believe it's because you stop caring what other people think about you, right?
Right,
And so, I care about what I want people to see me as somebody who is passionate, who is interested in them and in servant leadership and other focused, right? Client focused, employee focused, staff focused. That's who I am. How do I make this better
Yeah.
for my team? But if I'm making it better for my team or for that other individual, while if it's better for my team, I believe a rising tide lifts all boats. If it's better for your
Right.
team, better for the client, it should be better for you. If you're making something better for your team and it's not better for you, that's a boundary issue.
Right.
How do we, your team, your boss, your spouses, your children, right? All of those things, right? How do you have that healthy balance? That's really what work-life balance is all about, right?
Right.
And so how do you make that work? And I think, so the people pleasing part, I think there's a difference between um, being motivated by seeing people move in a positive way and just doing things to make them happy. And I think
Hmm.
that's a huge piece. That's a huge piece of that.
Yeah, I agree with you. And
Yeah.
I don't necessarily, I don't want to demonize people pleasing because I think
Hmm.
there's a real benefit for people whose interest is making sure everybody's happy and comfortable.
Yeah. Hmm.
Where the boundary I think comes in is like not doing it at the expense of your own well-being or at the expense of anyone else. I think that's
Right.
the huge difference. So
Yeah.
I think we should try to please people. I think people should, we want, like, my goal is for people to be happy. But I will just say personally, I prioritize my own well-being first. And sometimes that gets me in hot water. And I'm like, I'm in a jacuzzi. It is what it is. Like, my well being is so important to me. But I'm not making myself well at the expense of anyone else either. That's something that's
Yeah.
important to me. Is like to like really truly, like, I feel like there's room for everyone to succeed. There's room for I really kind of come from that mindset of abundance, that there's enough to go around. So if I'm succeeding, I want to bring you with me. If I can open a door and invite you into a room that's going to make your life better, I'm here for it. I'm in competition with nobody but myself. And I want people to genuinely be happy, right?
Mm.
I do. Live your best life is my motto. Live your best life, because I'm living mine, honestly, truly. But that's really kind of what guides like my whole everything. Everything I
Yeah.
do is so that people's lives can be better, whether it be on a professional way, like sharing information and different ways of thinking and different ways of like living your life authentically. If that's what I do through both the classes I teach and the words that I use and the way that I model my own behavior. But also like thinking about the people in my life who I'm responsible, my friends, my family, the people I come in contact with, the people at the grocery store. Am I going to be patient or am I going to be rude? Am I going to be kind or am I going to be, somebody that ruins their day? And I really do strive to be that latter person, the one that not to ruin their day, but to make their day better. The first type of person. But this is where, again, it's that like fine line of where do you like take that high road consistently, and where do you also like have a space to hold people accountable, right?
Mm.
I don't want to necessarily have an interaction where someone's being a real super jerk and I just let it go. Well, now I've just kind of reinforced that being a super jerk is allowable. Speaking of super jerks, by
Mm.
the way, we've become so popular that we've gotten some nasty comments on YouTube. Like, we have literally leveled up here in the keeping it real universe, that we've got trolls. And I will say, trolls, I will come for you. If you want to be mean, we will go there, because we do keep it real. No, I don't want to be mean to people, but I also want, if you want to be nasty, um like, good luck to you in life, with your pineapple carrot cake. That, again, it's just so stupid. Like, why be so mean? Why be so mean to strangers? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It doesn't make sense. But uh, like I told our friend Lamar, I talked to Lamar yesterday, and the hater's gonna hate, and I say, hate from outside the club. I'm too busy thriving. I'm too busy thriving. So. Uh, anyways, I just thought I would bring that up because, gosh,
Right.
that dude was kind of mean.
I'm kind of makes me interested to see if people have a negative thought on my idea of how much I can't stand cream cheese on a Jello mold. I just can't do it. So I grew up with it, didn't like it, won't do it. All right, so comment below. All right. But just having that conversation, just making me think, what I've thought about a lot in the last week. Um, and I read somewhere, with some of the stuff that happened this week about, people believing that empathy is a 21st century concept
Right,
and that, it's a millennial word or a Gen Z word, and that it doesn't necessarily exist or that it's not something that, is natural. And it really, it's sad to hear that because I mean, to think about the idea of what it means and if you don't have empathy, that means you're not other focused or you're not,
right,
and if you're in a job where people's lives are in the line, right? That's the thing with human services, folks. You make one mistake, you're affecting somebody's life.
right.
You have an underpayment, overpayment, right? Hit the wrong button, discontinue somebody, right? Or accidentally, turn off their Medi-Cal, right? Whatever it is, right? And we make those decisions that affect other people. We say, well, it's not our case, it's the client's case. Cool, it is the client's case, but we can make errors in, actual technical errors or errors in judgment that do affect their lives and the lives of their families. And, so that's really hard. And as leaders, your opinion, your idea of somebody, Tiff and I, we just we talked about we connected at the West Coast Child Welfare Trainers Conference, right?
Hmm.
It was a WCW, yeah,
Elemental P.
WCCW,
I hate acronyms
CC,
so
right?
much. I hate
But
acronyms so much.
yeah, so we got to hang out for a little bit before our classes, and then someone had to run and get up and go get their room, up north. But just it was great to talk to folks. And my class was how to have conversations and to have sensitive conversations, sometimes emotional conversations, in on sensitive topics, right? And where people don't always 100% agree with you. And I've had that
Hmm.
many, many, many times. And just, having that conversation about how people are feeling. And, if somebody has an opinion that's different than yours, right? Here's the thing. We all have our rights to our opinions, but we
Hmm.
do not have the right to our own facts. Facts are indisputable. The problem is in our society these days, we've decided that there can be multiple facts on one subject. And, we've talked about the last couple pods, just the idea of the lessening of scholarship, the devaluing of scholarship, the devaluing of research, where a lot of people are just responding based off of what they think is common sense or what somebody that they look to and they look up to and admire is telling them is the right way, as opposed to doing your own work. And that's a challenge, right? Because people can create multiple facts to, or multiple things that sound like facts, but it doesn't equal the truth. Our bodies respond to things, right,
Hmm.
as real. Fear, we respond to fear as real. What is an anxiety? What's your response to anxiety, Tiff? For me, I get a little buzz in my head. I get a little, my neck gets stiff, my stomach gets a little queasy, right? It hasn't happened yet. Whatever it
Hmm.
is I'm anxious about has not happened yet, but I'm still having real world
Right.
responses to it. So our feelings are that it's real. Other people can have the same stimuli and not have the same responses as us and may not see it as something that's anxious, right? Whereas
Right.
you and I look forward to coming to do a podcast. There may be somebody who said the last thing I'm going to do in the world is a podcast, or we're going to be trainers, and somebody's, why are you asking me to stand up in front of people? And so we have different responses to the same stimulus, which tells you that what we think is real and what they think is real is not the truth.
Right.
It's not the absolute truth. Real, our real responses do not always equal the truth. Just because you feel something strongly based off of your morals, your value system, how you were raised, your religion, right? Whatever it is, your favorite sports team, whatever it is, you have those, and those are emotional responses. They do not equal the truth. I've met some of my best friends, and some of my best friends, right? Some of my best friends are Dodger fans, right? The Dodgers are evil. Doesn't mean that they're evil.
Yeah.
They just root for an evil team and they need to get some holy water or something. I don't know. But, just thinking about that idea of recognizing, connecting with people on that human level and realizing that our emotions and our opinions are ours. You have your right to your opinion. And that's what I was telling the trainers. People have their rights to their opinions. And so when
Right.
we can validate those opinions. We can validate the opinions. We're not validating that their opinions are fact or truth. We're validating the fact that they had an emotional response. I saw you roll your eyes there. I'm just I mean, you have your right to that. Tell me what you're experiencing, as opposed to why are you rolling your eyes? I mean, you don't believe in, you know,
Yeah.
so it's something where we can hear somebody out, and it doesn't have to affect our overall judgment and our overall belief of who we are. And how do we bring that out to the front to be able to have the conversation with them and to bring them along in a sense of consensus rather than because not everyone's going to agree. I mean, I would say most things in life people don't 100% agree on, right? But we still
Right.
end up living and functioning in the best way possible. So what is that allows us to function together, right? And it's degrading. That's the challenge in our society. We have been taught that it's okay to feel that and to go with that feeling. And if you're feeling it and it's what I say is right, or you agree with me that it's correct. And if we're not doing our research, if we're not doing our historical research, our scientific research, or whatever else it is, how can you get to the fact? I heard somebody say, well, scientists and historians, they history is written by those who won. I've read plenty of books about what happened in history that have nothing to do with the winners, right? Which is, but that's that other side that you have to look at and say, okay, this is not the 100% truth. And sure, there's scientists who might be sponsored by a company trying to get you to do things. I mean, that I'm rewatching Mad Men. I don't know if you watched Mad Men,
Yeah.
but I just started rewatching it again. I'm on the first series on episode 5, and they were talking about the research that the tobacco industry did. Saying that smoking is healthy and that it cures diseases and things like that back in the from the 1800s until the 60s, and it's basically it was all shoddy. It was just to be able to justify the fact that we want you to buy our product. And so, yeah, we get that. We sure. But, especially when it comes to the data, you know, the data that's being shown, you get to read it. And when you have an accumulation of data, when you have data that is, I mean, you might have how many how many scientists that are shoddy as opposed to all the scientists, right? If you have 100 scientists and you have five that are paid off and in the pockets of somebody else, we treat that other 95% as, oh, well, they're just like the other five. Well, that's what our brain wants to do to protect us, right?
Hmm.
It keeps us from, you know, feeling like we're being had. But how often does that keep us from interacting with people in a fair and balanced manner? If 10% of our clients are gaming the system, why do we treat the 90% like the rest of the 10%, right? Where we're
Right.
suspicious and skeptical of them, right? That's unfair to that 90%, but we treat them like the 10%, right? And that
Right.
happens how often in life? And so
Yeah.
it's a challenge where we have to be more thoughtful. We have to be more more reflective of what we're feeling, which is hard because a lot of us want to act on our feelings and we're told that it's okay, right? I mean,
Well,
but
yeah,
we're not being chased by saber-tooth tigers anymore.
we aren't. We aren't. But I want to just clarify a couple of things. Looking it up on Facebook is not research. Looking it up on Reddit is not research. Just Googling it and going with the first thing that you read is not research. Uh, Chat GPT is a good start to research, but not research.
No,
Like
no.
I agree with you, and the you know I don't want to I don't want to like go conspiracy theory, but let's like number one of the things I was thinking about when you were talking is like this quote, like don't believe everything you think. And don't believe everything you think. This is something I use a lot. I love the phrase, your ego is not your amigo. Like, don't believe everything that you're
Yeah.
telling yourself because there's more to it. Um, and science change like the thing with like people like not trusting science and not trusting history. Um, there's
Because it
like facts
changes. Yeah.
change. Yeah, facts
Mm-hmm.
change over time where
Mm-hmm.
we get new information and new information leads us in a different direction.
Yeah.
So a fact could be factual in the moment based on like observations, research, development, whatever it is. It can be, and then something we get new information, and that new information might lead us in another direction. This is like I talked about that book, Rethink, or what was it called? Think Again by Adam Grant. I was looking for the book, the title. Think Again by Adam Grant. And that's like one of the things that he talks about is that we cannot just stay hyper focused on what we already believe to be true if new information comes out. Like we have to be willing to think again and look at it from a different perspective. And you started this conversation with empathy, and um, lack of empathy can come from so many different places, right? And by the way, it's one of many signs to look for a sociopath. Is a lack of empathy, and I'm not saying people who lack empathy are sociopaths. It's one of
Let
many
me.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I will when you're done. I'll call. I'll because that's where I was going. So keep going,
yeah,
and I'll
yes.
show you. Yeah.
But I mean, empathy in itself like shows up in so many different ways. Like if you yawn, I yawn. That's empathy, right? It's empathy. It's I'm not thinking like, oh, Carl yawn now, I'm gonna yawn, but it's that way of like connecting with people. So that's like one of the signs for people. If you don't yawn when other people yawn, you might have an empathy problem. But like empathy for me shows up in different ways. I'm always like, I piss a lot of my friends off when they're like spiraling and they're upset about someone. I always try to show like the other side of it. Well, what about this and what about that? And like, are you on my side or not? I'm on the side of this getting resolved, but I there's like a different perspective. Let's explore perspectives. And
Yeah.
so I'm always trying to like, and I do try to take perspective. I think this is something once I'm out of my dramatic moment where the sky is falling, it takes me 2 minutes to get out of that. I do try to always take perspective. But empathy shows up even in like TV. Can I tell you, if you cry, I cry. If I'm watching a show that I absolutely know is fictional and I absolutely know it's scripted and I absolutely know that these are characters that are like acting out a story, I cry on almost every movie, TV, like in all of these weird moments. My husband will look at me, he's like, "Why are you crying?" And I'm like, "Because she just found her kid, and I can only imagine like what that must feel like for like like sobbing." Oh, and he's like, "They're not real people, Tip. We're watching a show." And I'm like, "Yeah, but I feel it." Do you know the movie that makes me lose my shit every single time? It's Five Goes West, the American Tale, American Tale. And when the dad starts playing a song and the little cartoon mouse that's not real hears the song and he starts going, Papa, Papa,
Yeah.
I am a hot mess for the like I will be 4 hours later picking up lunch going
Yeah.
exhausted from like the feet like I've never lost a child. I mean, I lost AJ one time at a water park for like an hour. Um, and so I kind of know what it feels like to like find your kid that you couldn't find. So I do know that part, but it's like the like how do we not feel for other people's experiences? That's and maybe I'm overly empathetic because I
Well,
think I feel think like I'm hyper sensitive to mass shootings. Like every time one happens, and unfortunately they happen more than I would prefer none at all. Um, my body is I physically feel it and I lose sleep. I am anxious. I like hurt my heart hurts and the horrific thing that happened last week. I saw the video and I couldn't unsee it, and I was like devastated. And I don't agree with I don't even want to say his name, but I don't agree with him, but I would never ever wish harm at all. I can disagree with you and still wish you well.
I don't want to win like that.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
it's devastating. And so
yeah.
seeing it, and I'm safe on the other side of a screen. So I wasn't in the vicinity. I was like, but seeing that, and where my mind went, because I was traumatized, where my mind went was, oh my gosh, imagine all of these kids who have survived and they saw that firsthand, like in real life, with the fear that they must feel like, am I next? And the trauma that they experience, like, you can't get over that. And that's where like my empathy went, was, oh my gosh, all of the people who have been like that moment of like reckoning, like, am I gonna live or die in this moment? And that fear, I don't know if I'd ever recover, honestly. And so that's where my heart was just broken. I was devastated, and I had a hard time. I'll be honest with you. Um, I was training on Wednesday, and I have to have like a new rule where I don't look at the news during my lunch break, because coming back from lunch, it had all just happened, and I had a really hard time like clicking that off and
Focusing.
like
Yeah,
trying to come back and be like an energetic presenter, because my heart was broken, like just broken. And then there was a school shooting at the like simultaneously happening,
yeah,
and kids
yeah,
again, it's just such a disgusting dynamic. Like, what is happening? And so
yeah.
when like going in a completely different direction real quick, when I tell people I moved to Mexico, what, like there's always like two questions people ask me. Number one is, do you have internet there? And I'm like, yeah, it's not a third world country. Yes, Mexicans have internet. And the second question people ask me is, do you feel safe there? And that answer is, I come from a violent country. So, yes, I feel safe in Mexico because it's much safer for me there than it is here in the United States. And so I'm not afraid in Mexico because I just don't join a cartel or do cartel business. And so uh, it's really easy, much easier for me, because a lot of the violence and I'm not saying that Mexico doesn't have violent places. Please don't go like this all or nothing thinking. This all or nothing thinking, like, oh, well, you just don't live in Juarez. That's true. I don't live in Juarez. And I'm not saying that there's not like random violence in places in Mexico, but it's not evil like it is here. It's not universal, and it does happen. And so anyways, to
And
not
I'm
go
sure
too
there's
far there.
I'm
Yeah.
sure there's some places in waters that are completely safe, right? But
Safe and
you know,
wonderful. Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, and that's the thing. I mean,
Exactly. And it's
you
not
know,
all or nothing.
no, it's not a binary, and most of life is in between the poles.
Right.
It's the gray. It's not black or white. But I mean, if you believe what society wants you to believe, then everything is extremes. I mean, that's what we know about Mexico is the cartels, right? That's what we
Right.
know about Mexico are these criminals, right? And
And
I
there are
mean,
cartels. Yeah, I'm
sure,
not denying that there are
right,
cartels, and I'm not
right,
going to deny that there's cartel violence. That all of that is true.
yeah,
All of
and
that is true.
sure,
And
but
yeah,
if that's
yeah.
and if you want
And
to portray that without having the flip side, but the flip side doesn't sell.
right,
Right?
right,
If go to your place and you can't have an 8-part miniseries about the snowbirds that come from Canada to Mexico and hang
right,
out at the bar where their friend cooks for them and brings them food, right? I mean, that won't
right.
sell.
Yeah.
Maybe on IFC
Although,
or something, right?
yeah.
But
But can I tell you real quick? I'm going to do a quick shout out. There is a wonderful, wonderful lady that lives in my community in Mexico that has a podcast, and she
yeah,
actually has a podcast about life in Mexico from the immigrant population. They call them
yeah,
expats, but you know how I feel about that. Called "Turn Left at the Cactus." Take a left at the cactus is what it's called, and she interviews people from the community about the snowbirds. But
okay,
anyways, that's not
yeah.
neither here or
Well,
there. But where I was going to go with that real quick, Carl, and I'm going to give it back to you, is the fact thing is that the there are more than one set of facts, right? There's not facts and alternative facts. There's not the truth and then the alternative truth. But what I am saying is that there are different ways that people do interpret like what's happening. um, One of the things about research that I love is I'm a huge fan of meta-analysis. And so like I try not to rely on just like one study, right? Because one study can say anything. When when I'm really, really researching and I'm really looking for fact, I try to look for studies that do meta-analysis, where they look at lots and lots of different studies and they like put the data
Mhm.
together to
Yeah.
find like the most true thing. And
Hmm.
so again, we're Facebook, Facebook and Reddit can get you in the right direction. Chat GPT can get you in the right direction, but looking really at like reliable sources of information. And I'll just throw it out here right now. When things like are happening in real time, like people are searching for info, like we always have to be super skeptical about information coming out like right off the bat, because chances are it's probably not accurate.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, because we're so information based and we want things in like instantly, sometimes like you saw just with this incident last week where like a message went out about messages on the bullets and where they came from, and then they came back and were like, oh wait, maybe we were too quick on that one, let's retract that. That's still the message. And so we as human beings have to be really, really careful with information.
You know where you see it, Tiff?
Yeah.
When somebody tries to unsend a message.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
What's
Oh,
your
I
first
love.
thought?
Oh, as soon as I get the recall, I want to see the first message. What was in
That's
that
right.
that they're trying to
Yeah,
take back?
exactly.
You know, I love
Exactly.
cheese mix. So I'm always like,
Yeah.
ooh, what was the original
But
message? Because I want to see
that's
what
the
it was.
same that's the same thing. The initial message or the thought of the initial message that's replaced by the secondary message, the initial message always in our mind will be it must have been something bad. It doesn't,
Yeah.
not that it had to be a typo. It just it must have been something bad. So I tell people when I do business writing courses, if you're ever going to first of all, don't unsend the message. Send the message and say correction, right?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
if you accidentally unsend the message just in reflex, when you send out the new message, say the previous message unsent, which is based off of a typo or a time change or a room change, just so people, because in the back of their minds, they're going to be thinking, remember, our brains want to be safe, right? Oh, something bad must have happened. So, and I know people are, why should I have to cover my bases? Look, man, 5 seconds that's going to allow somebody to feel better when they interact with you rather than have their guard up. I wonder what that first message said. If they're thinking, I wonder what that first message said when they're reading what your message is or meeting with you, they're not hearing you.